we must start with Monday Night Football and my Denver Broncos, who essentially last night clinched a playoff spot. They didn't do it actually because the Colts technically could still, and Miami technically could still, but now the reality of those teams making the playoffs are Denver has to lose out. Those teams have to essentially win out. And so pretty much last night was the clinching factor for the Denver Broncos to get into the playoffs. And here's why I'm a believer that this rebuild for what the Broncos are doing, what they've done with Sean Payton, is different than what I believe the Houston Texans did. Now, we were all high on the Houston Texans what they did last year. Bringing in D'Amico Ryans, CJ Stroud, it looked great. They made the playoffs. And now, when we look at it 12 months later, we're kind of like, well, CJ struggling a little bit. You know, you've got D'Amico Ryans, you know, he's making some good calls, not as much as defense, which he's a defensive guy. It's not as good as it was last year. CJ's missing throws. The Texans just don't quite feel right. And I was one of those people to start the year. I was really high on the Texans. I thought they were going to be one of the best teams in the AFC. I was really high on CJ Stroud. I liked everything that they did. But then I started to think about it more, and I was like, okay, we probably did elevate them a little too quickly because they played a last place schedule, which means softer schedule, softer opponents. They went from terrible to not terrible, and that gets you a lot of wins on a fourth place schedule because you're playing other fourth place teams, most of which are still terrible the following year because they didn't get your quarterback coach. What Denver's doing, though, and I think makes Denver unique, and also give a little bit of credit, I think the Chargers, you could also argue, fall into the same style. Denver won 8 games last year. Denver is not as bad as everyone thinks they were. Vegas, for whatever reason, had Denver at 5.5 to start the season, and that, along with Denver hasn't been very good the last 7 years, just kind of put them in this spot of everyone thought Denver was a terrible franchise. The way we talked about Chicago coming into the season was actually more applicable to Denver, but because Chicago got Caleb Williams and Denver got Bo Nix, that's where the storyline, that's where the media decided to take it. Denver got, with 8 wins, playing a third place schedule, playing slightly tougher competition, playing in a better division. Again, Houston, we loved Houston last year. Houston had a fourth place schedule and played in an awful division. Denver plays in a division with the Chargers, who look like they're going to the playoffs, and the 2-time Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. So we got tougher division. We got tougher schedule because it's not fourth place. So, and again, Denver just decided, and this is what a lot of teams don't do and aren't willing to do, but Denver did it to the fullest degree, which is rip everything out. It does not work. Denver held on to this ideal. Denver won the Super Bowl in 2015, and they held on to the idea that, well, we're just close. We just need a quarterback. Oh, we're this close. We just need a quarterback. We still have Vaughn for a few years. We still had to keep Talib in the no-fly zone for a few years. And, oh, look, now we have, Philip Lindsay has a year in there, and it's like, oh, look, we're really close. It wasn't working. A lot of the fan base, myself included, we kept buying it, and all it really led to was a bunch of disappointment. It was year after year after year of just being slightly better than terrible, having a few good games, and getting fake optimism. So Denver tore it all down. New coach, new quarterback, and this is with tearing it all down, with getting that new quarterback in, eating $80 million in dead cap of the Russell Wilson money. You bring in Sean Payton, you draft Bo Nix, Vance Joseph, who, give Sean Payton credit, a lot of people, myself included, wanted Vance Joseph fired after the 70-point game last year in Miami, kept with them. You brought in a whole bunch of new guys, starting with the offensive line. This offensive line that was not good just a few years ago. Bowles was homegrown, but then they bring in Ben Powers. They draft Quinn Miners. They bring in McGlinchey from San Francisco. They had to let go of Lloyd, which is, hurts, but understandable. You bring in your guys on defense. You say, hey, look, this isn't a lack of talent thing. This is a coaching thing. We're going to keep doing what Sean's preaching. We're going to keep doing what Vance is preaching. And the Broncos don't get talked, besides myself, they don't really get talked about that much on national media. So this is a team that has to go from horrible to good, and no one's patting them on the back on the way up. No one's saying, oh, look what they're doing. sports media, FS1, ESPN, would rather talk about the Dallas Cowboys in a much worse position than they would ever want to talk about the Broncos, who are in a much better position. But again, Denver tore it all down to the studs. Brought in a whole bunch of new players, new coaching staff. There's a new owner. Everything is new. And they committed, and they kept working it, and that's what it looked like last night. And I'm not even saying that was a great win, but this was not supposed to be the year that it just worked out for Denver. Again, you got $40 million on the books just for this year. You have another $40 million next year for Russell Wilson. But you got $40 million in dead cap just because of Russell Wilson last year. You have a rookie quarterback. You have a week 14 bye, which look at all the teams that have week 14 byes. Look at how they've struggled over the last couple of weeks because they had to play 13 consecutive football games mixed in with Thursday nights, Sunday nights, these other primetime games. So this wasn't supposed to be the year Denver, if the Sean Payton experiment was going to work, this wasn't the year it was supposed to work. But they got the quarterback right, even though everyone said, Bo Nix, why are you drafting Bo Nix in the first round? Trust me, own people here at HardFoul. Tony loves, I went back and looked at the text message from draft night. I feel bad for you because they got Bo. And I'm not trying to throw Tony under the bus. That's my guy. But that was the perception around the league and the perception around fans is that this is a terrible franchise. They're no good. Look who they took in the first round. Sean Payton is just a Drew Brees merchant. All of these things started adding up. But look at the final product. 8-5, heading into the bye week. Your rookie quarterback, who I know Jaden Daniels is coming off a great 4-touchdown game, but over the last month and a half, Bo has played better than any of the other rookie quarterbacks. The offensive line is playing, you could argue, I know Detroit from a talent perspective is the best offensive line in football, and Philadelphia is right behind it. But from a play perspective, and if you want to look at the numbers and the stylistically how they're playing, Denver's offensive line is as good as anybody's. Denver leads the league in sacks and takes the least amount of sacks. So highest sack differential, which is huge because a lot of these guys were here last year. And what was the problem with Russ? Taking too many sacks. What was the problem with the defense? Post Von Miller not being able to get a lot of pressure. They have fixed both of those. This is 1,000% a coaching story. When we talk about the great coaching stories in the NFL, what they're doing in Minnesota, Kevin O'Connell, what they're doing even with all the injuries in LA with Sean McVay. When we talk about these great coaching stories, Matt LaFleur having to guide the beginning part of the season with Jordan Love being hurt, Denver's right up there with the best coaching stories. What Sean Payton and Vance Joseph are doing is a great coaching story. And people could say what they want. And I'll end here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it later. You could tell sometimes teams get locked into this. Oh, well, they only play because they're not prime time or they're not big media teams. They get locked in kind of this 1 o'clock window, which is they play all the early games. A lot of people aren't really paying attention to them. And so a lot of people have opinions, and it's kind of just based off either the stats, box scores. They haven't actually sat down and watched the team play. Denver's a perfect example of this. I've heard over the last handful of weeks, well, Bo's only doing well because they're throwing screens. Not really. You go look at his numbers, or you just go watch the game. Like, look at last night's game. Multiple 7, 8, 9 double-digit throws. He is throwing the ball downfield 10, 15, 20 yards. And I know the Browns aren't that great, but Myles Garrett's still there. And did you hear Myles Garrett's name really called on the broadcast? And that throw to Marvin Mims, the 93-yarder, Denver clinches playoff spot. They tore everything down to the studs. They rebounded back. That's what it looks like. And that's what gives me faith versus the Houston comparison I brought at the beginning, why I think this is sustainable long-term versus what Houston did. I think we're starting to see a little more flash in the pan, a little more coming back down to earth. Love what they're doing. First time in 7 years. Won the Super Bowl, haven't made the playoffs in 7 years, about to go back. Let's also talk about the other big story that came from the weekend, which was the hit on Trevor Lawrence. And a lot of people, and I love when regular people love to give think pieces on how quick an athlete should react or how fast an athlete should move. These guys are moving at speeds I guarantee the average person has never gotten close to in their life. These guys are bigger than you, stronger than you, faster than you. They just do things that are athletically you could not fully comprehend. And so Trevor Lawrence goes to slide. It's a late slide, in my opinion, and guy hits him. And obviously, there is some degree of this is everyone's reacting to the result, which is Trevor Lawrence got lit up. We saw what his arm did. We're all very well aware of CT, concussions, all these other things, and the hit looked gnarly. We get that. But just because the hit looked one way does not mean you cannot judge intent off the end result in almost any facet of life. And let's also not forget, and this is just the reality of the world, I don't blame Trevor Lawrence for that, even though I think he should have slid earlier, and I don't blame the Texans defender for hitting him. What I blame are, and we go straight to the top, a guy like Patrick Mahomes, when he abuses, and D'Amico Ryan said this earlier today, people gave him shit for it, and I think he's 1,000% right. When you abuse that you know the rules of hitting the quarterback are just outright different than any other position on the football field, and you take advantage of that, and you start kind of going towards the sideline and fake and get another 10, 15 yards, Mahomes during the 40, Mahomes does it a lot. When you fake that, you put yourself in a position where the defender now has two choices. I either have to totally let you go and I just have to assume you're going out of bounds and then I give up the big play, which potentially costs us the game, or I got to go light you up one time, because I guarantee Trevor Lawrence will never do that again. Will never do that again. He will either slide super early or he will find another way to get down to the ground quicker. He will never attempt to do a, let me go get these extra couple of yards, let me almost slide. The Kenny Pickett play from a couple years ago, one of the ones that made him famous. Do the fake slide and then keep running for 50 yards. At some point, someone is going to run through you. At some point, and Tom Brady said this earlier, he did an interview. Tom Brady said, it's not up to the defenders. It's not their job to protect the quarterback. It's the exact opposite. So if these guys are taking advantage, and again, go to the very top, and it's not just Mahomes, but he's a big factor of it. Like Josh Allen gets hit, but it looks different when you're Josh Allen because he's 6'5", 230. Cam Newton used to take these hits all the time, but it was different because he was 6'6", 240, 250. For these guys that aren't as big as Josh Allen, aren't as big as Cam Newton, don't fake it because someone's going to run through you. And guys who are naturally athletic, naturally twitchy, naturally get it, they react differently. Go back to the game last week with the Ravens. Lamar has that signature move going to the corner of the end zone where he just kind of stops as the guy run in front of him. Against Eagles, guy didn't stop right in front of him. He's able to compose himself because he's aware there's a chance this guy doesn't just run right by him, and so he braces for impact. He's ready and expecting, so he's already got his arm ready in the stiff arm position, because these guys aren't going to let you fake towards the sideline and run down for an extra 10, 15 yards. Quarterbacks are too athletic to get away with that now. So yes, do we judge the end result? Unfortunately, that happens a lot. And do I feel bad for Trevor Lawrence because he got lit up? Yeah, I do. But the idea that this is a dirty play, or the idea that this is outrageous, the amount of even former NFL players that have come out and said, this is outrageous, there's no place for this in the game. Well, then there's no place for faking a slide or faking going out of bounds. If you're giving yourself up by the letter of the law and the letter of the rules, if you're going to give yourself up, actually give yourself up. Don't hide behind the fact that, well, they can't come and blow me up because it's going to be, it's going to be a penalty, it's going to be a foul. No, if you put yourself in that position, that is on you. This is a contact sport. This is a high-speed sport. Don't give me this, oh, well, he can't hit me. No. So, yes, do I feel bad for Trevor Lawrence? 1,000%. But all the guys, just remember this. Think of all the guys who now try to fake and get a couple extra yards. They are going to come light you up.